Hi, everyone. I'm Nicole, and that is Nancy. It's hard. I guess we're virtual, so I could point down. I think that is Nancy. But yeah, we're happy to be here, and we're going to talk to you about a project called the DevSlop project that has been sort of going on now for about 3 years. A little bit about me. I've been active in the OWASP community for, I don't know, maybe close to a decade now. Yeah, and I have been in the cybersecurity space for around the same time, and I'm happy to be here. Nancy, do you want to introduce yourself or?
Yes, my name is Nancy Gariché. I work in GRC, governance, risk management, and compliance for the government of Canada. I've been involved in OWASP since about 2016, 2017, and a co-project leader since 2018, I believe. So yeah, really excited to talk about our project and how we've grown in the last few years.
Cool. All right, here we go. All right, so what is the DevSlop project? Sorry, I think my cat just strolled past, but so the DevSlop project is an evolving project, right? So it's not just like one thing, it's becoming like maybe more than one thing now. It's more of like an umbrella project. So we're going to go into a lot of detail as to like, where it's come from and where we think it's headed and how we sort of just plan to be as elastic and, iterative as possible to keep this thing kind of moving in the spirit that we're looking to keep it continuing in. So the history of this project is actually kind of fun. About 7 years ago, I wrote a vulnerable web app called Cyclone Transfers in Ruby on Rails for the Broken Web Applications project that was maintained by Chuck Willis. And so that sort of was like, I decided writing vulnerable web apps was a great way to train people on web security. And it's also kind of fun to write bad code. I recommend that everyone try that a little bit. You learn a lot. And so it became this part of the Broken Web Applications project. So then one day in 2017, it kind of didn't get a lot of attention. After I was done with it, I was sort of like, all right, that's enough of that. And then one day in 2017, I get this very, SOS email from Tanya Janko, who I think a lot of you may know. She's, been part of the OWASP community and the AppSec community for a long time, basically saying, Cyclone's down. I really need it. I'm going to be doing a demo in an hour. And I was like, whoa, people are really using this thing. I didn't realize that. And so I figured out how to get it back up and running. She made her demo and we met. And so then about a month later, we were all in Belfast for AppSec EU in 2017. And we all met, Tanya, Nancy, myself, Christian, who maybe some of you know, Mod Security. We all met in Belfast and we just sort of connected and we were like, wow, there's a lot of stuff we can do here to, engage more in the AppSec space and help others learn, because we were all really into the idea of learning, right? And teaching and learning and teaching and creating an environment like that. So this DevSlop project was born and we sort of came up with this like kitschy name, right? It's like DevOps, but sloppy DevOps, but sort of like trying to kind of get our hands around what this new model is, like DevOps, like what is DevOps or DevSecOps, like all this new tooling, all these new things are coming into play here. And, if you're coming from a client server AppSec background, there's like a reformation that has to happen there in your brain to understand this new model. So we were kind of focused in that area. So then I got back to it again and wrote another vulnerable web app called Pixi, right? And this is a mean stack app that has an API that's, intentionally vulnerable. There's a lot of good vulnerabilities in there, which I'll get into in a second. And so that was sort of like how we began the project. We're like, here's another vulnerable web app. Let's do something with it. So then our friend Francisca, who I couldn't be here today, but, she works heavily in the mod security space, created a CI pipeline to demonstrate how you can put a WAF in front of a vulnerable web app to actually protect it, right? So it was an automated, deployment tool that allowed you to just get the WAF rules up and running so you can actually protect this application. So we sort of just began to evolve, right? And then in about 2019, Nancy was like, I think we should do a live show. And we were like, all right, that's how this project kind of goes. We're sort of up for anything. And so Nancy took charge and developed this whole live show concept, which we're going to get into in a second, where we basically interview members of the AppSec community or just the security community in general about DevSecOps tooling, ideas, projects they're working on, open source projects, things like that. So we can all kind of learn in this space. So What is Pixi? I guess I could get into this a little bit, right? It's still there. It's on Docker Hub. You can still download the containers and run it. And it's basically a really vulnerable web app that has a lot of problems, right? It's written in Angular, Angular 1, so there's a lot of horrible Angular constructor cross-site scripting in there, poorly stored secrets. There's a MongoDB that's misconfigured. There's JWT token problems left and right. You can do CSRF. There's MongoDB injections. There's IDOR issues all over the API. There's really vulnerable dependencies. So it's kind of like a buffet of common AppSec problems that you experience in a mean stack environment. So it's fun. I mean, it's not really, it's not like it's getting a lot of updates, but it still is there and it does work. So if you're interested, you could check it out or you could ping me. Yeah. And then Pixi CRS. So the web app rule, the WAF rule set, right? So again, this was all done by Francisca, and it is a way to automatically test and deploy WAF rules so that you can protect an application like that is already vulnerable, like Pixi. It's very interesting, right? Because it's a different way of thinking about defense. So I was like, I recommend if you're interested in how WAFs work and how you can automate WAF rules, it is a great place to start to understand how that whole model works. And it works really well. I mean, the legitimate traffic doesn't get blocked, but the illegitimate traffic does, and it's all sort of automated. Cool. All right. So what is the Devsop show?
Yes. So the Devsop show, a bit like Nicole mentioned in the history of the project, what was missing a bit was the part where Tanya actually started the show, because as she was developer advocate for Microsoft, she was already creating a lot of content and she was interested in AppSec. So she started just experimenting and turning the camera on and going live. But at some point it got overwhelming, right? You travel a lot for your job, you do some OWASP projects, you're volunteering. So she asked me to help her out and try to help her manage the show. And I did. So I really enjoyed that part of researching, because as someone who's in GRC, I don't get to be hands-on that much. But I need to be aware of different technologies. So it was really interesting to me to learn about what was new, but asking other people to come and talk to me about it. And that was a way to learn. So I helped out Tanya. And as you may know, and if you follow Tanya on social media, she started her own training company. So she moved away from the project, but still comes back as the host once in a while, pretty often actually. But yeah. I started to take care of the content. So what it is about is basically inviting InfoSec, DevSecOps practitioner, and to teach us something new. Right. And so it really always starts, my research always starts with the content, with technology. And the inspiration can come from a blog post, from a podcast, from anything interesting that I hear about it, and say, okay, so let's talk about this on the show. That would be interesting to talk and to demo. I wanted it to be different than a podcast. So we were on video. So we always try, it's not mandatory, but we always try to have a demo part on the show to differentiate from a podcast per se. So it's a video show. And the fact that it's DevSlop and it's for sloppy DevOps, it also opened the door to new type of content that was maybe less explored in the OWASP world, right? We're really focused on AppSec, but DevSlop allowed us to go into cloud security, Kubernetes, containers that, yes, we're not the first one to talk about them in OWASP, but, it was a space that was not as explored as other topics. So we really focused on that, but, we're still OWASP. So any topic about security, code reviews, secure coding is also topics that we cover. And then we like to explore topics with diversity, right? So at first it was about, okay, so we have a show next week. Who's available? So we go, ask Tanya, do you have a friend? Ask within my community who wants to be on the show. But then this year, especially, I think 2020, I really decided, let's be consistent, right? Let's put out a show at least twice a month. Weekly was too much, but at least twice a month, and bring somebody on and be consistent with the show. And I started asking myself, who else? Right? Like that's always now the question. Once I have a topic in mind is, yes, sometimes you have that first bit, you think about secure coding and you have that like InfoSec rock star in mind. But the question I ask myself is, who else? Who else is out there? And then I go on a search, a YouTube search, a podcast, anybody. Who else is talking about that topic and can give us a new perspective? So diversity is really important in the content. And then have fun learning. So deep learning, mastery comes after doing some deep work. So we know that won't happen by watching 1 hour of Devsop show. So we want to make it fun. We want to explore new projects, new topics, deep dive in them, but make it fun, make it entertaining. It's an awareness show and makes you we want to make you curious to want to explore those topics on your own later on. And a sense of community. Why? Well, because people are coming from everywhere around the world. We've had guests from South Africa. We've had from Switzerland, from India, Australia, everywhere around the world. So I think every time we have somebody else that comes from elsewhere around the world, it really grows our community and everybody kind of feels welcome and says, yeah, this show's for me as well, because I've seen somebody from my community on the show. I think I'm good for the next slide.
Yeah. So I don't know, this is kind of a bragging slide about our stats, right?
Yeah.
As we learn like what works and what, does it, well, I don't know if we learn what works better, right? It's not what doesn't work, what works better, right? There's a lot of optimization on the topics and the guests and how we're going to get, more engagement. And, at this point we have over 40 episodes. We have over 4,000 watch hours, 31,000 views, almost 3,000 subscribers. I mean, it is, I think, Nancy, you were saying that we've qualified for YouTube, some sort of YouTube.
Yeah, monetization. I don't know if we'll turn that on, and we'll definitely won't be driving any luxury cars, but it's still an achievement that we should be proud of, I think, because it means that we have enough followers and people are consistently watching, right? It's more than the subscribers, is knowing that people are watching, whether it's live or after as a replay. They come back to our channel and we have a consistent audience. So that's been really fun to see the growth, right? Like I could see from 100 followers to subscribers to thousands, and then looking at the watch hours every week coming up, and now 4,000 hours. So it's really great.
Yeah. And so, again, as we like sort of keep, pushing and producing this show, it's like we want to really, people spend an hour or 2 or 3 with us, depending on if it's a workshop or a regular episode. We want to make this time as valuable as possible, right? So, people, time is super valuable. So we want to make it, really important, for the audience, right? So some of the episodes that we have, we think are great, right? Like these are technologies that maybe some people have exposure to, but the speed and scale at which these things come out, I think it's very useful to have these kind of like, overview kind of exploratory episodes where you learn at a high level what a tool is, so you can try to figure out whether or not it's for you, right? Like there's just like, sometimes that's really hard to get the answer to, right? So for example, we had an episode, I think it was a week ago or 2 weeks ago now, with Clint Gibler, who runs the TLDR Sec newsletter. He's great. And the newsletter is great. I recommend it to everyone. And he demoed a tool called SemGrep to us, which is basically a static analysis tool that like does it a little bit differently than, traditional static analysis tools. And he basically walked us through the entire tool, the end-to-end, how the tool works, how to write rules, and got us off the ground with writing rules in this tool for, in like 15, 20 minutes, right? So there was just a lot of like, we were up and running and had a pretty good understanding of when we would use a tool like this in the hour and 20 minutes that was the episode. So I really recommend that if anyone's interested in like a new model of how to do static analysis, it's not, the traditional static analysis vendors or whatever, this is a really great way to try to explore what else is out there.
Yeah. And what was fun is that there's a live audience with us when we do the show. So I don't know if you haven't seen the show, it was supposed to be a 60-minute show, but because we had so many questions from the audience, at some point, Clint couldn't go over all of his content. And we asked, do you mind staying with us a bit longer? And that's what ended up being a 2-hour episode, almost like a workshop. So,
yeah.
Yeah, next episode.
And these are just high episodes. We're trying to convince people that like good stuff is happening here. That's what we're trying to do right now. We're not going to walk you through every single episode. That would be so boring. We just want to show you at a high level, we actually are doing cool things and we're learning cool things on this show. So that's sort of what we're gonna talk about.
Yes, I wanted to mention this episode because Farah, how I found because of the YouTube algorithm. So basically it just ended up in front of me and she was doing bug bounty. I think she only had 3 videos. And at some point she came out with a video about JSON Web Token hacking. And I thought, that could be compatible with our show. And she blew up and she's part of the community of the bug bounty community, right? So it's not necessarily the same as OWASP. It's more of a defensive security more than defensive security. But it's interesting to bring that community to us and then use that time as well to show them how to defend themselves against those attacks. So we had the main guest was Farah Hawa, but we also invited Rana Khalil, who's also a web app specialist who was able to provide advice on how to protect on the attacks that Farah was explaining. And inviting people from the offensive side to show us, what can be done and to inform the defensive side how to protect their application and their systems. So that was a fun show for that.
Yeah, this was another great show. I mean, they all were kind of great, but Checkoff is a open source tool written by Bridge Crew, and it is a pre-flight checking tool for infrastructure as code. So if you have CloudFormation or Terraform scripts that are about to, or Kubernetes that you're about, YAML files that you're about to hit the button on and launch infrastructure with, Checkoff is a great tool that allows you to check all of those scripts for compliance or other sort of best practices so that bad stuff doesn't go out the door. And there's a lot to this tool, and there's a lot of rules that that have been written by the Bridge Crew team. But it is open source. It's free. Anybody could download it and deploy this. And tools like this we feel like are interesting to highlight because it's sort of a newer model of security, right? Pre-flight checks of infrastructure as code. I mean, I think that's kind of newer. At least it's not more than 2 or 3 years old. I don't know. I could be wrong. But, again, that's the goal here is to show you a new way of doing things, right? And open source projects that are committed to being open source and to providing resources for this new model.
Yeah. And we're used to having static analysis to talk about static analysis tool for regular software development. So what is fun also talking about DevOps and DevSecOps is seeing all these infrastructure as code or everything as code coming up and seeing how we can use practices that we've been using in software engineering and applying them to infrastructure and Terraform and CloudFormation and things like that. I find that our audience is very curious about that. Anything that's for infrastructure as code or policy as code, security as code, those are definitely topics of interest. Yes, API security. Our most popular episode, I think it has 10,000 views, is from a lady called Katie Paxton Fear. She's from the UK, and she did a show on hacking APIs, and that was very popular. She had a huge following, and we have really good feedback about that show. But I really wanted to mention that one with the one that Rajni Hattie mentioned that we did a couple months later, because I said that DevSlop earlier was about community and about talking about who else could be talking about different topics that we're used to. I met Rajni Hattie at a Women Tech Maker conference in Montreal, and she had a presentation on API testing. and realized that she had not, basically the focus of her presentation was not security at all. And we talked a bit after her presentation, and Nicole had her vulnerable app and some content. I think you did a lightning talk in Switzerland as well about API security, and I gave her that information. And then a few months later, I think even a year later, API security top 10 came up, and I send that to her and say, hey, I'd love you. I know that you're a tester. I know you do API testing. Here's the API top 10. And could you come in the show in a couple months? Because we do book our shows months in advance, in a couple of months, and see, what can you do? How can this be applicable to you as a tester? How could this guidance that is provided by OWASP help you change the way you work? And then she came up with this presentation and how she used the API top 10 and adapted her work to that. So I really love that show because of that story at the background and how we can bring people talk about the same topic from different perspectives. So we had the hacker with Katie, and we have the security, the tester, just API tester, just for quality, I guess. And not focus on security, but using OWASP guidance to change her practices. So, yeah.
OPA. So OPA, I think we all know maybe what that is. It's Open Policy Agent, and it's a very popular policy as code kind of tool that was just recently admitted to the Cloud Native Computing Foundation. Yeah, CNCF.
Yeah.
And we had an episode with Josh Stella, who showed us how OPA or how OPA can be used in a variety of different environments. And there, he has a tool called Fugue or Rego, that is an open source tool that sort of abstracts away some of the Rego that you need to write with OPA to make it a little bit easier to write Rego rules, which is actually really great. If anyone has ever written Rego rules, I think you'll realize it's not traditional programming, at least in my opinion. You have to learn its way, and it can be very confusing. And this open source tool kind of makes that a lot easier. So again, this allows you to create policy as code rules in your organizations, with ease, that you could then deploy to do all sorts of infrastructure as code checks, Kubernetes checks, whatever YAML file you have, you can run OPA against it to validate that YAML is compliant, secure, whatever it is, whatever controls you're looking to validate against, you can do that with a tool like this. So it was great. I mean, you just learned so much about how to optimize the use of these tools, not even just what they're used for, but how you can actually go from 0 to 10 very trivially with just knowing where these tools exist and that they exist and what they're used for. All right.
Yeah, I want to use this slide maybe to talk about what's coming up and the community. Go ahead, Nicole.
No. Yeah. Have at it, Nancy.
Yeah. Well, so that's basically what we do. Having the shows, we take feedback from the community basically to know where we want to go next. Because, it's a pandemic, we're virtual. So the shows is a really good format that we want to continue, but there's been a demand for more content, for more training, for more workshop. We've invited different members of the community. There's a lot of content out there, and we have a platform that can be used. We don't have to reinvent the content, but just, format it, make it accessible to everyone. So, look out for more content from us, from other people from the community. Would it be workshop? We have, I'm very excited personally about the CTF, a DevOps CTF, where it's more of a builder challenge. We have a lot of people signed up already. And
when is that? That's next
December 6th, right?
Okay.
December 6th. And we build challenges, and you get flags for building things instead of breaking them. And you get points. And we just signed up a Cloud Guru as a sponsor to give prizes for the top teams. So that's going to be really exciting and a learning experience, but we gamified it by giving it the CTF format. So that's one example of something that we use the community for, the platform that we have to create new sorts of content.
And if you're interested in going or signing up, you can go to our meetup page, in which that's sort of how the workflow goes. All new episodes or new shows, workshops, whatever, come through the meetup page, and then we live stream them on YouTube. That's right, Nancy. That's our
yes.
our
I try to always send people to the meetup page because that that's the start of a relationship, in the sense that you can know what's coming up every time we have a new guest booked. I try to publish it there so you can plan, you can know what's coming up. Our YouTube is more of the where we store our shows and where it happens, but where we have all the information, or the almost replacement for a website, as the meetup community. So to know what's coming up, I think that's the best way to start. But of course, to put the word out about everything, we are on pretty much all social media platform like Twitter and LinkedIn and Instagram, where you see our posts that we try to brand very particularly for DevSlop, so they're recognizable, and I always get really nice comments about them saying, "Oh, I'm always waiting for the next show and see who's coming up next." So we try to make it exciting and be as professional as possible.
Yeah, and we think there's a gap in this area, right? We think it's a little bit harder for people to, find environments and communities in which they could just learn something, learn a new tool, learn a new model in the AppSec space. So we're deeply committed to sort of filling that gap with this content, right? I just think that's like, I don't know. I've looked around. We haven't found anything that's quite like this. So we're very excited about like what we're doing here. And again, we're coming from like, we were writing vulnerable web apps to this. So like, I don't know, a year from now, who knows what this will be, but that's sort of the ride we're on, right, Nancy?
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess something I did mention on the slide that I want to mention is we don't see Francisca that much on the show because of time zones and family and other issues, but she's in the lab, right? She's working on testing different pipeline, and she actually has a series of blog posts on dev.to, explaining her project and experimenting with different cloud platforms. Depending on our interest, depending on the demand, we really create different type of content that can be appealing in the community, to the community.
Cool. Yeah.
That's what
I think we are. Yeah, that's our pitch here. Come follow us. Come join our shows. If you like them, tell us. If you think we could do something better, tell us that too. We're very open. We just are happy to kind of share this type of model with you all. So thanks for having us.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Okay. Then I have one tiny question. Say somebody has something that they think is a good topic for you to discuss. How should they best communicate that to you? How would you prefer them to communicate that to you? Or do you prefer to do this on your own?
Oh, no.
No, I think we're very open. Yeah.
Yes. Our DMs are open on all the platform. We're actually really accessible on Twitter, everywhere. You just send a message, and and we're open to anybody that wants to come speak. Of course, like I was saying during the presentation, we're booked. I think I was so scared because early on when we were doing the shows every week, I was like, oh, what are we going to do next week? So I just started preparing the shows months and months in advance. I think we have guests until March or April 2021 booked. And it's really hard to just put somebody in the schedule. We like to have some weeks off. But yeah, we're always hoping to have different people that have content that would be interesting to our audience. So yeah, I hope it shows that we're doing it for the community, that something that represents you, and that is for you. Therefore you're welcome. And we don't always invite the top expert in the field or whoever wrote the book on the topic. What you'll see coming up is Kiki Morgan, for example, that I started a relationship with just because she was in Slack channel, and she kept asking questions about things about AWS and permissions and serverless. And I would see her coming back week after week for question and building her thing. And I reached out to her and say, "What are you building? You should come to the show and tell us about it." And she'll be coming next week, actually on Sunday, to talk. On Sunday to talk about that. So really, it's about like meeting new people, knowing their project, and bring it to everybody else and see what's possible.
Okay, awesome. Then I'm going to say thank you ever so much for your explanation of Devsop. And people, by all means, as they said, go have a look and give their project their content a view. It sounds like there's something there quite literally for everybody.